The most expensive mistake as an automotive locksmith happens before you touch a car. It happens the moment you accept the wrong job. When you are building a business, there is immense pressure to say yes to every ringing phone. You need the cash flow, you want the Google reviews, and you want to prove to yourself that you can handle whatever the market throws at you. But dispatching a van without running a job through strict business filters is how you end up in dangerous roadside conditions, stuck holding the wrong parts, or facing a hostile customer who cannot actually prove they own the vehicle. Before you calculate what to charge for a key, you have to ask a much harder question. Should your shop even be at this location in the first place? Professional owner-operators do not accept every call. They use pre-dispatch judgment to isolate and filter out business risk before they ever put the van in drive. You can filter incoming calls by mapping them onto a matrix. On the horizontal axis, we measure the margin potential of the job, from taking a loss to making a high profit. On the vertical axis, we measure the physical and legal liability of taking the job. A highly qualified job, like a customer bringing a verified vehicle to your shop with clear identification, lands squarely in the bottom right corner. High profit, low risk. Contrast that with an aggressive caller who lacks a title, or a request to cut a key on a pitch-black highway. These plot in the upper left quadrant. You face maximum physical or legal danger, usually for a price shopper's rate. Technical bravado will trick you into taking those upper left jobs. Mastering this matrix is the primary difference between a highly profitable operator who controls their schedule and a stressed technician who assumes massive liability for free. The first pre-dispatch filter is quote math. A quote that looks highly profitable over the phone often bleeds cash once hidden friction points are factored into the unit economics. Look at this margin breakdown. Let's say you quote a seemingly healthy surface rate of $250 for an all keys lost call. First, you have to subtract $45 for the uncompensated round-trip travel time, fuel, and van wear. Then, subtract another $25 for the time spent looking up the correct FCC ID. Next, subtract $40 for the cost of the fob itself. Add a $20 deduction to cover your statistical risk of pulling a faulty aftermarket part off the shelf that eats up an extra hour of programming attempts. Finally, account for $30 in callback liability, the gas and time required if that customer complains the remote stopped working next week. Your $250 win drops to an actual net margin of $90. If you miscalculate the distance or the customer argues over the price when you arrive, that $90 vanishes. You end up paying the customer for the privilege of doing the job. When you understand true job costs, losing a bid to a price shopper isn't a failure. It is a strategic victory that keeps margin-leaking jobs off your schedule. The third filter evaluates scene safety and roadside reality. This chart visualizes data from the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety regarding assistance providers struck and killed by vehicles. 89% of these fatalities occurred on roads with speed limits of 55 miles per hour or higher. 63% occurred in darkness. You have to evaluate the physical location of the vehicle during the intake call. You require the customer to move the vehicle to a safe, well-lit parking lot before you will dispatch. You might lose the emergency service fee if the customer decides to call someone else. That is an acceptable trade-off to protect your life and your commercial auto liability limits. The final filter is customer-supplied parts and expectation control. Customers frequently purchase cheap, unverified fobs online to save money, then call you to program them. But the customer expects a discount because they didn't get a working key. You control this risk by setting rigid boundaries on the phone. Offer zero warranty on outside parts, utilize attempt-only billing, where they pay for your time, or establish a hard policy declining outside parts entirely. Establishing uncomfortable boundaries over the phone prevents arguments in a driveway later. Letting a customer walk away because they refuse your terms is a highly profitable business decision. Evaluating authorization, safety, profit, and capability before you move the van is what separates an amateur from a legitimate automotive locksmith. Because local documentation requirements vary heavily depending on where you operate, you must verify your current OEM rules and local laws before you finalize a quote. As you evaluate these jobs, you need a system for workflow memory. You need a centralized place to log FCC IDs, keyway data, tool coverage checks, and the specific math behind every quote you build. This dashboard in Autosmith Pro gives you that memory. It gives you a dedicated space to store your accept, refer, or decline reasons and log risk flags on specific vehicles or customers so you are prepared the next time they call. Visit autosmithpro.com/business/jobs to build your shop's memory. When you track your friction points, your next quote will be smarter, faster, and more secure than your last. Sustainable locksmithing relies on rigorous business tools and preparation. Protect your margins and protect your license, and filter the risk before you roll.